Hello everybody, welcome back. Jiu-Jitsu 2000 here. Today I'm back with another interesting video. We're continuing our Phase 1 Pathfinder certification course. Today we're going to be talking about Block 4, see that? 4, Module 1. We're going to be talking about 3 killers. We're going to be talking about hypothermia, dehydration, and shock. Again, I'm going to be referring to my manual quite a bit because I have a lot of research that I've done and I've written a lot of notes in here. Let's talk about the first one, hypothermia. This is a life-threatening condition when the body's core temperature drops below 95 degrees. Treatment aims to prevent further heat loss. It's vital that a person is warmed up gradually. If warmed too quickly, the blood is diverted away from the vital organs, such as the heart and the brain, to the skin, which can actually speed up cooling of the body. A person with hypothermia must be moved on a stretcher. Now, number 1, get them to a safe, sheltered place where they can rest and prevent further falling of their body core temperature. Send someone for help. Step number 2, if no further risk of further cold and possible, move any wet clothing and replace with warm, dry clothing. Don't give up your own clothing though. Step 3, insulate the person from the ground, from conduction. Help them lie down with a survival blanket. Give them a sleeping bag if you have one. Now, step number 4, give them warm. Now, I stress that, warm, not hot. Give them something warm to drink, especially something that's a high energy food like chocolate would help them. And step number 5, make sure their head is covered. If they're not wearing a hat, all that heat loss is coming out of their body. Shivering, goosebumps, pale, numb skin, confusion, irrational behavior, amnesia, incoherence, belligerence, lapses of consciousness, along with slow, shallow breathing, erratic heartbeat, slow weakening pulse can possibly lead to cardiac arrest, and those are all things that have to do with hypothermia. Now I'm going to add one. I'm going to add hyperthermia. Hyperthermia is when the heat gain exceeds the body's ability to lose heat. This can result from exposure to hot environments, exercise, too much exercise, fever and anesthesia. Reduce the heat gain by moving to a cooler environment, by reducing heat production by muscles, ceasing the activity, and restoring the blood volume by drinking fluids. So we have hyperthermia and hypothermia. Hyper is when you're too hot and hypo is when you're too cold. Now, number 3, dehydration. This occurs when you fail to replace your water that your body loses. Vital to recognize symptoms early. Factors that can lead to dehydration include high and low temperatures, humidity, work rate, clothing, body size, fitness level, and injury. About 75% of the body is water. As this water is lost from the body due to sweating and urination, it must be replaced. If not, health problems begin to occur. These become more serious until they possibly result in death. Now, I have a little chart here that I wrote down, and I'll show it to you here in a second. And it talks about your body loses approximately 1 liter of water a day or more. So try to drink at least 3 liters of water a day. If you don't know how much 3 liters is, it's 3 32-ounce bottles of water approximately. Now, the effects of water loss. Between 1 and 5% of dehydration, you'd have thirst, you'd have discomfort, your urine would be darker, loss of appetite, lethargy, impatience, drowsiness, nausea, headache, flushed skin, increased pulse, and weakness. Now 6 to 10% of water loss, you have a worse headache, dizziness, dry mouth, blue tint or shade to the skin, slurred speech, swollen tongue, blurred vision, tingling in your limbs, inability to walk, difficulty breathing. Now, if your water loss is between 11 and 12% or more, stiffness in joints, deafness, defective vision, shriveled skin, lack of feeling in the skin, inability to swallow, delirium, twitching, unconsciousness, and possibly death. Now let's talk about shock. Shock occurs if the circulatory system fails. Most common cause is severe bleeding, but it can also be a consequence of burns. It says initially there will be a rapid pulse and pale, clammy skin. As the condition progresses, breathing becomes rapid and shallow, pulse weakens, and skin becomes pale gray. If untreated, unconsciousness could likely result. This is shock we're talking about now. This is the fourth killer. Don't give them anything to eat or drink, as an anesthetic may be needed. Moisten the lips if they're thirsty. Call for help. Shock victims must be transported in the treatment position. Okay, now there's a few steps here to deal with shock victims. Treat the cause of shock. For example, bleeding or burns. Suspect shock too if you notice any symptoms, yet you can't see any obvious injury. It could be caused by internal bleeding. Step number 2 in treating it. Help them to lie down. Insulate them from the ground with blankets. Raise and support their feet higher than their heart or head. Step 3. Loosen tight clothing. Neck, chest, and waist. Keep the head low. This may prevent them from losing consciousness. Keep them warm. Cover them with a blanket or a sleeping bag. Okay, so now we're going to go and I'm going to show you my book. I'm going to show you more specifically. We're going to talk about that chart. So here's some of my stuff. Here's hypothermia. Here's some of the steps. Here's hyperthermia. That's hot. Dehydration. Here's that chart that I was reading to you. This is a good chart. Feel free to pause the video if you want to take a look at this and jot that down. That's a good chart. And this is in reference to water loss and by percentages. Here's shock. And then here's some information on treating shock.